And he finds us.
Mom?
Dominica.
Oh, Dracula, how I've missed you after all these years. But you will give me Dominica.
You have no claim on her, you loveless monster.
You can't stop me. Your power matches you. Weak and insignificant.
You underestimate me now as you did then.
Dominica, come to me.
Enough!
Hey comic book fans, Kevin Gibbon with you once again with another episode of Comic Let's Talk. But right now I want to talk about Dracula. Now first, a special note. We will not be discussing Tomb of Dracula from Marvel during this broadcast. We're going to create a separate show for that as we don't have time during the show. Then we come up to Sword of Dracula 2003. You've seen Dracula, but you've never seen him like this. At 600 years old, he controls blood so keenly that he can make almost anything his army needs. And he will rule the earth. But what happens when the King of Vampires faces the return of an even greater, older evil? What unholy alliance must Dracula form with Ronnie Van Helsing, the young leader of the massive agency known as the Polidorium? Hard-edged horror action from Greg Scott of Sabretooth and Jason Henderson of Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. This issue, Ronnie Van Helsing is new to her leadership role in the Polidorium, but it doesn't stop her from dragging the organization into a full assault of Dracula, Lord of the Vampires. An opening act issue that plays out in near real time. The Polidorium meet Dracula for the first time, but are all the Humvees, coagulant missiles, rocket launchers, and Black Hawks at Ronnie's disposal any match for a man who controls a reservoir of blood? And again, we're not covering Tomb of Dracula in this program. We will do it on another program. We want to mention that Tomb of Dracula, the 4th series, came out in 2004. Then we come up to Dracula's Revenge, also in 2004, by Matt Forbeck and Simon Kodransky. Covered by Tommy Lee Edwards, someone is savagely butchering the prostitutes of Whitechapel. Sound familiar? Except it's been a decade since Jack the Ripper stalked these streets. Spring-heeled Jack never drank his victim's blood. But Dracula's been dead for 11 years, so why has Abraham Van Helsing been summoned to London? In 2005, we got Magdalena vs. Dracula, written by Chris Golden and Tom Snigersky, art by Joyce Chin. It's monstrous. New miniseries to pits Top Cow against classic monsters. Ultimate evil is coming to the Top Cow universe, and all of the Cow stars must unite to stave off an apocalypse. The seeds are sown when Dracula invades London, and only the Magdalena can stop him. But can Drac turn Maggie into a vampire, or will the Tomb Raider be able to stop him? Find out here and be on the lookout for next month's chapter, Tomb Raider versus the Wolfman. Sorry, I just had to throw that in. Also in 2005, Curse of Dracula from Dark Horse Comics, written by Marv Wolfman, art by Gene Colan, covered by Dave Stewart. In the 1970s, writers Wolfman and Colan created 70 issues of terrifying tales in the classic Marvel series The Tomb of Dracula. Now Wolfman and Colan are together again, offering a fresh take on the most enduring character in horror fiction and catapulting the Lord of the Dead back into comic stardom. A mysterious and persuasive figure is moving amongst the circles of San Francisco's political elite when Jonathan Van Helsing and his team of vampire hunters come to town investigating a string of grisly murders and stumble into a virtual pit of blood-soaked horrors. They know it's only a matter of time before they come face to face with the Master of Dar. Also in 2005, Dracula Met King Arthur by Adam Baranek, Christian Baranek, Chris Moreno, and Jay Photos. Vlad Tepes of the Dracula Order and his empire are about to be overrun by the Turkish army. He will certainly be killed unless he makes a deal with Lucifer himself. Vlad will become Dracula, the first vampire, and be sent back to the time of Camelot to destroy King Arthur. Then we come to 2006 with Army of Darkness. He's dismembered deadites in every form, but never faced a creature born of the undead legend. Gathered from the darkest and most remote corners of the globe, the monsters have assembled under the vengeful hand of Dracula to lay siege to the New World. New York is being bled dry by a plague of vampires, and Ash must battle the inner wolf, the soulless man, the curse of the ancients, and the Prince of Blood himself before they turn the city that never sleeps into a hotbed of the living dead. Only a bumbling second fiddle monster hunter and our own chainsaw-wielding hero can recover the artifact with the power to destroy the vampires forever. But Ash's disbelief in the monsters of old may be the gateway to his downfall and their ultimate victory. Grab your crucifix and the spare shotgun cells. This is the over-the-top monster mash you don't want to miss. Returned from the past, Ash finds that New York City has been turned into a giant nightclub for the Walking Dead. Traveling through the streets of New Transylvania, Ash and Eva must find the fiends responsible for turning New York City into the undead capital of the world and reverse the damage before the curse spreads to the entire world. Also in 2006, we get Dracula, Al Capone by Jim Krueger and Chris Moreno. It's 1920s Prohibition-era Chicago, and Al Capone leads the largest mafia organization in the country. Business is so good that a Transylvanian bloodsucker looks for a piece of the pie. So Capone is now forced to join with Elliot Ness and the Untouchables to save the city from an even bigger threat. Also in 2006, we get Dracula Asylum from Dark Horse. The book follows the activities at Dr. Seward's sanitarium, the location from which Dracula drew several victims before being destroyed by Jonathan Harker in the original story. It's now after World War I, and after being gone for years, Dracula is suddenly restored to Earth, trapped beneath the grounds of the madhouse. His evil reaches out into the minds of the weak and insane, as a new crop of victims is harvested. New heroes are needed to battle the impenetrable evil. Then we come up to Spike versus Dracula. From the pages of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in October 2013, Dracula writes in his journal. He tells of Magda, a Romanian sorceress he has learned of, a powerful woman who was killed in transfiguration and hypnosis and could command the very elements. Dracula sought her out and became her willing pupil. The girl's clan was initially wary of him, but quickly realized that having Dracula as a protector had notable benefits. For years he protected the clan and watched Magda grow old. She constantly refused his offer of the gift of immortality. One night Dracula visited the clan to find everyone dead. Dracula found Magda's body and swore revenge on her killer. Then we come to X-Men Apocalypse versus Dracula, written by Frank Thierry, penciled by Clayton Henry, cover by Jay Lee. One is a villain that has been plaguing civilization since the time of the pharaohs. The other is the deadliest vampire to ever walk the earth. It's the battle to end all battles as Apocalypse confronts Dracula. Enemies since the Crusades, they've met again in the 19th century London. It's 4 issues of Victorian mayhem, and it starts here. Welcome to 19th century London, a time of big hats, cobblestone streets, and apocalypse. In 2008, we get The Darkness versus Eve, Daughter of Dracula, continuing Dynamite's crossover events with Top Cow. While Eve hunts the streets, slaying the undead and unclean among a marked increase in paranormal activity, Jackie Estacado is having a bit of a problem with both his Darkness darlings as strange new forces vie for control of the city and its newly awakened supernatural presence. Written by Leah Moore and John Repion with art by Edgar Salazar. This volume collects issues 1 through 4 of the ultimate crossover event, Dynamite's Eva, Daughter of Dracula, meets Top Cow's The Darkness. Then we get Sword of Dracula Vampirella in 2008 by Henderson, Scott, and Sequin. When Dracula, the world's most dangerous terrorist, loses a key vampire witness to Ronnie Van Helsing of the Palladium, it's an all-out war of vampires, guns, trucks, and RPGs to get the witness back, and into the middle rides Vampirella, who is picking a side all her own. But will Vampirella and Ronnie's mysterious past tilt the balance in Dracula's favor? Then in 2008, Dracula meets the Wolfman, cover by Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta's Dracula meets the Wolfman, story by Stevie Niles, art Francisco Francavilla. In the wake of the legendary Count Dracula's final excursion to England, the bloodthirsty Count finds himself on the hunt for a beautiful peasant woman in a village living in the shadows of Dracula's castle. Unfortunately for the seductive Count, someone else has eyes for the beauty, and that someone else just happens to be the fear-inspiring Wolfman. Prepare yourself for the battle of the year as Vampire faces Lycanthrope in a battle to the death. Dracula 2010, written by Roy Thomas, art by Dick Giordano, covers by Jelena Djurjevic, Bram Stoker's Dracula, colored for the first time. Bram Stoker's legendary novel of gothic horror comes to life in a stunning adaptation. Solicitor Jonathan Harker travels to distant Transylvania and encounters the enigmatic and sinister Count Dracula, unearthing dread secrets about his foreign host and his castle. The horror continues in issue 2 as Dracula makes his way to England, setting his sights on Lucy Westenra and Mina Murray, Jonathan's fiancée. Boom brings us Dracula, the Company of Monsters in 2010, covered by Dan Brereton, Kurt Busiek, Daryl Gregory Wires, Scott Goldowski, artist. He's back from the dead and starring in a new ongoing horror series from the mind of Kurt Busiek. A powerful predatory operation acquires a valuable asset, Dracula. They think they own it, but no one can own the son of the dragon. There's a monster in their midst that puts Hannibal Lecter to shame. He plans to gain his freedom by blood. It's bloodsuckers versus bloodsuckers. Busiek brings an incredibly modern spin to the Dracula mythos. We get Death of Dracula in 2010, written by Victor Gischler, penciled by Giuseppe Camuncoli, covered by Giuseppe Camuncoli and Mark Jurjevic. He is the legendary Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Who would dare attempt to overthrow him? Only Dracula's son, Zaras, a ruthless and clever upstart with the bold ambition to unite all the world's vampire sects under one flag. But Zaras' older brother Janus isn't sure he likes the idea of a new regime and seeks allies to oppose Zaras. And again, if I'm pronouncing some of these names wrong, I do apologize. I'm not sure how to pronounce all of them, so I apologize for that. Then we get Dracula, The Dead Travel Fast in 2010 from Alterna Comics. The Dead Travel Fast, written by Andy Fish, art by Andy Fish and Veronica Hebert. Andy Fish applies the twisted sense of humor and his dark sensibilities to Dracula, setting the story in 1931 and mixing in Nazis, ghosts, and werewolves. John Harker travels to Transylvania on his first business assignment with a reclusive, eccentric client. Meanwhile, his fiancée Mina is tempted by the strapping young Texan visiting her friend Lucy in London. Also in 2010, The Complete Dracula from Dynamite, covered by John Cassidy, written by Bram Stoker, adapted by Leah Moore and John Reppion. Art by Colton Worley. Dynamite presents an unprecedented comic book series that tells the complete story of the Lord of the Undead, Dracula. For the first time in 112 years, the tale that Bram Stoker intended to tell is told, including Dracula's guest. If you thought you knew how it began or how it ends, you were wrong. Writers John Reppion and Leah Moore are joined by Painter. Then we come to Victorian Undead Sherlock Holmes vs. Dracula, also in 2010. Written by Ian Edginton, art by David Fabry, covered by Ryan Sook. A year after the defeat of Professor Moriarty's revenant horde and the firebombing of London, restoration is well underway. Yet from across the sea, ancient eyes bring their hungry gaze upon the still vulnerable capital. Dracula is coming. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson investigate the wreck of the ship, the Demeter. Its crew missing, the corpse of its captain lashed to the ship's wheel, and soon realize this is merely the opening salvo of a war from beyond the grave. The Black Bat vs. Dracula in 2011. Writer is Mike Bullock, artist Eric John. A return of the originals event. From the first time in history, three eras collide in one place as Pulp Fiction's newest heroine, Death Angel, joins forces with Pulp's enduring vigilante, the Black Bat, to battle the eternal face of horror, Dracula. Mike Bullock and rising star Eric Johns bring this spine-tingling tale of darkness, lust, and fear to you. In 2012, we get Vampirella vs. Dracula. The writer is Joe Harris, artist Gene Diaz. Spinning out of Alan Moore's retelling of the ageless horror classic, Dracula has come to America to play out his timeless narrative in this brave new world. Only he didn't realize another vampire already beat him to it. Drawn to one another across continents and centuries by a mysterious foe, both Vampirella and Bram Stoker's immortal monster find themselves sucked into a time-tossed epic of love, hate, death, and damnation. But can an epic built for one vampire possibly hold them both? In 2012, we get Dracula, the graphic novel, adapted by Jason Cobley, art by Stas Johnson. I went down into the vaults. There lay the Count. He was either dead or asleep. I could not say which. For the eyes were open and stony, but without the glassiness of death. HarperCollins brings us Dracula 2012, written by Bram Stoker, art and cover by Becky Cloonan. This new unabridged edition of the cult classic Dracula by Bram Stoker brings a unique contemporary visual spin to the story through the art of renowned Eisner Award-winning artist Becky Cloonan. The complete text of the original book is complemented with more than 50 original illustrations in the form of horizontal and vertical panels, spot illustrations, and ornate borders by Becky Cloonan. This is a Dracula you have never seen before, contemporary, edgy, and stylish macabre, with Victorian overtones and an unusual color palette. 2013 brought us Vampirella, Dracula, Halloween Special, the writer Shannon Eric Denton, the artist from Dietrich Smith, and Vampirella once again joins forces with Dracula and Eva in order to confront a doomsday cult intent on releasing one of the Ancient Ones back upon the Earth. The trio, empowered from their previous successes, will confront these evil forces head-on. These three warriors race from threat to threat, in order to stop the apocalypse, but will learn that even their immense power may not be enough. Van Helsing vs. Dracula in 2015, written by Patrick Shand, art by Michelle Bandini, covered by Richard Ortiz. Launch point. Last year, Liesl Van Helsing was attacked by an evil from her father's past, but she survived and has moved on with her life. Besides becoming the name that vampires in the tri-state area fear, she's also found love in admittedly the strangest places. However, when old friends come calling on her for help, she will find herself pulled into a final conflict with the deadliest vampire of all time. In 2016, we get Army of Darkness, Furious Road, written by Nancy A. Collins, art by Cuber Ball, covered by Tyler Crook. 20 years from now, the Deadites and their army of darkness have succeeded in bringing down the Western civilization. An unexpected upshot of the demons taking over was supernatural species such as vampires, witches, and werewolves, forming an uneasy alliance with humanity in order to survive. The only hope for both mankind and monsters alike is a ritual that will send the Deadites back to the hell that birthed them. But first, a ragtag crew that includes the Frankenstein monster and Eva, the daughter of Dracula, have to track down the fabled spellbook known as the Necronomicon. Ex Mortis. Evil Dead 2, The Revenge of Dracula also came out in 2016, written by Scott Peterson, art by Yvel Guichet and Horacio Dominguez, covered by Yvel Guichet, Joe Rubenstein, and Ivan Nunes. Dracula, the Prince of Darkness, becomes the Prince of the Evil Dead universe when his undead path crosses with Ash. When his stolen Ex Mortis is used to revive Dracula, Ash must be the wooden stake that sends him back to the grave. But when Drac reveals that Ex Mortis has also revved an even greater monster, Ash and the vampire must team up to stop it with the help of the Kandarian dagger. In 2017, we get Eternal Thirst of Dracula, written by Mike Wolfer, art and cover by Roy Allen Martinez. In the annals of horror, one name towers above all others as the true titan of terror, Dracula. Set in 1975, the eternal thirst of Dracula finds the insidious vampire king in self-imposed exile on a remote island in the Philippines, a tropical paradise where he has created his own kingdom far from the prying eyes of the modern world. Behind the walls of this fortress lie unimaginable terrors as Count Dracula and his vampire bride slake their insatiable thirst for human blood throughout the halls of his mansion of the damned. We also get Dracula Files in 2017. From the pages of Scream and presented in a sumptuous hardback edition, this is horror comics at its best. KGB officer Colonel Stachys desperately hunts for Count Dracula, who was spreading terror in 1980s Britain after escaping from behind the Iron Curtain, blending Cold War paranoia with horror staples. Then came Anno Dracula from 2017, written by Kim Newman, art and cover by Paul McCaffrey. 1895, Prince Dracula has ruled Great Britain for 10 years, spreading vampirism through every level of society. On the eve of Dracula's Jubilee, radical forces gather to oppose the tyrant. Kate Reed, vampire journalist and free thinker, takes a seat on the Revolutionary Council of 7 Days, though she learns that the anarchist group harbors a traitor in its midst. The Grey Men, Dracula's dreaded secret police, have been ordered to quash all resistance to the rule of the arch-vampire. In 2018, KRG Comics presents Carl Vincent, Vampire Hunter, Dracula Rising, from Kevin Given, Rodolfo Ezequiel, C.L. Trice, and with Mark Pennington doing the cover. In true noir fashion, Carl is visited by a mysterious lady in black who wants him to go with her to the old Oak Hill Cemetery in order to hunt a vampire she calls Lo. While at the cemetery, Carl passes out and wakes up in his office. He's had blood drawn from his arm. Carl's time-traveling friend, Athanasius Timon, or Nathan, shows up to inform him that the woman who visited him was none other than Dracula's daughter, Dominica. She's come back in time to raise her father from the dead in time for the Equality Equinox. They must gather the 4 equality crystals for a ritual that will make vampires all-powerful and allow them to take over the world. Carl and his band of vampire hunters go after the crystals themselves in order to prevent the vampires from taking over. Will Carl and company be able to gather the crystals in time to prevent Dracula from engaging in this ritual? You'll have to buy the comics to find out. And that was Comics Let's Talk for this week, discussing Dracula and his history in the world of comic books. next time, this is Kevin Given saying so long and keep reading those comics.